Let's go green. Sponsored by EirGrid, managing and operating Ireland's electricity grid for a cleaner energy future. Check out airgrid.ie for more.
Hello, and you are very welcome to this week's episode of Let's Go Green here on Midlands 103. I hope you are safe and well as you tune in this week. We have a lovely show lined up for you this week. Well, of course, I'd say that, wouldn't I? But I do think it's a good show. We have Zoe Ryan went to the World Junk Couture World Finals for us. And a little bit later on, we'll be joined by Ricky Whelan, the Biodiversity Officer for Offaly County Council. And Ricky's going to break down all the lingo around biodiversity and simplify things for us as we look towards spring and trying to do our bit in the garden and hopefully bring a bit of colour back into the landscape as well. But first things first, and I mentioned this in last week's show, the European Union has brought out some new rules in relation to fashion and the destruction of clothing that never gets worn. Because often when we talk about the environment and climate change, we focus in on fast fashion and the fact that fast fashion isn't long lasting, so therefore it gets dumped and it's got a really short life cycle. But a significant amount of clothing is generated in the world and never gets worn at all, and the EU wants to try and do something about it. And to talk about that, we are joined by Pat Kane of Reusey. Pat, you're so welcome back to the programme.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So, Pat, what exactly has the EU been up to?
Very good. So just let me take a step back for a second. For some years, brands, especially the big fast fashion companies, and some that I would say people pay a lot of money for, they were destroying their unsold stock. So basically burning or shredding brand new elements, clothes, handbags, shoes, whatever, instead of donating them or discounting them. And the reason why, so they say, is to protect brand value, to avoid overstock on the market, and to deal with logistics cheaply. It wasn't illegal, but of course it was wasteful and frowned upon because who does that? Mm-hmm. So now that's changing. So as you said yourself there, Aisling, under the EU's new sustainability framework, which sounds complicated, but it's just a set of rules that are coming out. And especially this is one called Eco Design for Sustainable Products Regulation. So ESPR. Companies are being restricted from destroying their own unsold goods, basically textiles or footwear, as I said. So they basically can't do it anymore. They must disclose how much unsold stock they have and what they're going to do with that. And in many cases, I suppose, in most cases, I'd like to think destruction of unsold goods is going to be completely banned. The goal is obviously to push brands toward more like a resale platform or repair or recycling, or just like essentially better production planning, which, you would think mainly the more traditional ones, the big fashion houses, they wouldn't know their stuff by now, but it doesn't work like that.
And I know, it's even been the subject of a TV show, and the name of it escapes me, but on Apple TV, where they went through a stock like that and the shredding of beautiful pieces of leather and really beautiful clothing, but it was to protect the luxury element of the brand. And I think an awful lot of consumers are completely oblivious to what's going on.
It's true. Yeah, it is true. People just don't know. And, some of the brands, I would dare say, their whole ethos and the whole, if you go into their stores, it's all beautiful and it's all, fancy and put together we are the top of the top, of what's out there. However, behind the scenes, I suppose things are not as nice, so are not as positive or not, as I suppose decent as we would like. And I suppose it ultimately comes down to the fact that the fashion industry is, one of the most resource intensive industries out there in the world, so destroying perfectly good clothing or shoes or handbags or whatever it is, accessories, wastes water, energy, labor, the raw materials that were collected or, consumed during that production. So what the EU are doing, and, fair play to the EU, because we are one of the best regions around the world when it comes to setting regulations and rules and whatnot. So businesses can do better. Yeah. So I suppose what they want is companies to design better, produce smarter, take responsibility for the full life cycle of what they sell. They are coming to us with what, the sustainable development goals, for those familiar with that, that framework would know. Number 12 is responsible consumption and production. And in there, we're looking into overproduction. It's now becoming a legal risk for the business, a reputational risk for the business. If they don't follow the rules, it's no longer just, and please, just is not even a fair word here, but it's not just an environmental risk. There's much more in there at the moment.
And talk to me about those consequences, because sometimes, companies, particularly larger global firms, they might look at things like this and go and scoff and sure, look, it's the EU, what do they know? And the fines sometimes, and I know in our own country, the fines don't necessarily match the crime. What will the consequences be for these companies if they don't adhere to this new framework?
Yeah, so it usually means a few different things. We're looking into fines for illegally destroying stock. We're looking at product recalls. If their overproduction is proven. We're looking at restriction of selling goods in the EU if their compliance is poor. So, the penalties, they are decided by national authorities in countries like Ireland or, places like the UK, if applicable, I don't know, or France, so each national authority will decide what to do. But the reality is they need to match that spirit of the EU law. So certainly penalties and certainly restrictions when it comes to selling their goods. I say, our most sensitive organ is our pocket. And with businesses is no different. So, and again, obviously, if we are exposing those brands, there's always an element of our reputational damage, consumer trust, all of those things that brands spend so much money in marketing, branding every year, to build. You could just throw that in the bin overnight if you, don't comply. Yeah, so that kind of thing, I suppose.
Do we know yet when this will all come into action, or what stage is it at?
Yes, so it was put in place there, that in July, from July 2026, I'm trying to remember the details, large companies here in Ireland won't be allowed to destroy any new or unsold goods because they didn't sell. There would be exceptions, very limited. It's not a 100% flat ban, as we say. But if we're looking at products that have some sort of health and safety risks, hygiene risks, if it's damaged or, in a way that cannot be fixed, obviously a little hole or a missing button on a t-shirt, on a shirt, that's not the case. We're talking about broken, beyond repair. If it doesn't comply, if the garments or whatever it is, they don't comply with EU or Irish legal safety laws or rules. So there are a few cases, but they will have to justify and document why that destruction is necessary. So we're going to see big changes from July 26, and then standard reporting formats from February 27. So, and that's obviously like with any other regulation, it starts with the big guys, large companies from mid 2026, and then you go into the medium-sized companies, phased in later, but they are expecting full compliance in place by 2030, which I know it sounds very far away, maybe, but these things take time. And, mainly when you're looking at ensuring things are in place and working as they should.
And the fact that they have to report and put into black and white what they're doing means that it will be possible to hold companies accountable in a similar way to the gender pay gap reporting system that's already in place. And I think that in itself is a reputational tool, because I know many people, when they're going for jobs, they're Googling the gender pay report of that individual company to decide whether or not they even want to apply for the job. And this will have a very similar effect. Well, Pat Kane of Reusi, I know we'll have you back on the show again, but we will talk about this again, because this will be a very interesting space to watch, particularly, Pat, to see how the industry makes adjustments so that they are producing less products that are going to be wasteful.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Coming up after the break, we will be joined by Ricky Whelan, Biodiversity Officer with Offaly County Council. Stay tuned.
Let's Go Green, sponsored by EirGrid, managing and operating Ireland's electricity grid for a cleaner energy future. Check out airgrid.ie for more.
You're listening to Let's Go Green here on Midlands 103, and we are joined now, once again, by Ricky Whelan, Biodiversity Officer with Offaly County Council. Ricky, you are very welcome back to the programme.
Thanks, Aisling. Good to be here.
Now, I know that it has been, let's be frank about it, a wet and dreary start to 2026 on the weather front. But we are technically now well into spring, depending on how you define spring, because I know Celtic traditions and meteorological experts disagree on that one. But we're in March. We are officially in spring, and it is time for many people to maybe be looking at the garden and thinking, oh, I could do with a bit of a clean up. I could be prepping now for some summer colour. But doing that in a nice biodiversity friendly way can be daunting if it's not your area of expertise. So, Ricky, I wanted to chat to you about it in the hopes of helping our listeners out. So my first question, what's the difference between, and this one to me now is a little bit of a bugbear, and I kind of would equate it to the difference between smoked Irish salmon and Irish smoked salmon. So, so what's the difference between Irish grown plants and native Irish plants?
Okay, yeah. So a native plant or animal is something that has always been here as part of our sort of flora and fauna of this island. Now, back since basically before the Ice Age, or before the last Ice Age, if you like. So they've always been here in geological time, per se, and they were not introduced by humans or some other means in the sort of in modern history, I guess. In that case, people will be thinking about the likes of the oak tree, the hawthorn, the alder, those sort of, trees that we're all familiar with and we know from, forever. Compared to the likes of stuff there've been garden varieties that were introduced afterwards, and stuff like laurel hedging, beech, those sort of things, sycamores. They've all been, now they've naturalized. A lot of them are here for a long time and have naturalized, and we sort of take them for granted in our countryside, but they wouldn't be considered native.
So things like heather, holly, they're native.
Correct.
She asks selfishly because she may have recently planted some. But okay, so they've always been here. They're here as long as Ireland is here, effectively, or thereabouts, as the country and the landscape has evolved. And then Irish grown plants. It's a very popular term when you go out and about, not even just to garden centres, even to supermarkets that are selling plants.
It could be literally anything. I mean, they could take a variety from Chile, somewhere with a similar climate to ours, New Zealand, wherever wherever, some Atlantic sort of country, and grow them off in wherever and sell them here as Irish grown. I mean, it doesn't mean anything other than they're grown in a garden centre or a tunnel, somewhere in Swords or wherever. They could be tulips, they could be a Chinese variety, it could be anything. Now, in many cases, that doesn't matter to the bee that comes along to eat the nectar in it. So that is important point to make as well. So we're not managing nature reserves or protected areas as such in our garden. So what you have in your garden is your personal choice. But I suppose if you do want to have natives, keep it to. We don't normally plant stuff that would be non-native in the wider countryside if you're trying to call it conservation or whatever. So, so the likes of biodiversity officers and conservationists and people into that side of things would always promote to use native hedging if you're planting a hedge, instead of something like Portuguese laurel, which is introduced, but also it can be invasive because it likes to run off down the street and jump the wall and go into the local woodland and outcompete the actual native plants. And people around us would be very familiar with Charleville Woods, for example. Charleville Wood should be a native oak woodland, and is, but there's a massive problem with laurel in there, and it has completely went bananas on its own, unkept, and it's now shading out the understory of that woodland, and you don't see the likes of the hollies and the ivies and the stuff you would normally see in a native Irish woodland, and that's becoming a problem. And it's even beginning to shade out the likes of the bluebells and those native things that we would be familiar with, and seeing the red squirrels scarping around and all that sort of stuff. So it does begin to interfere with those habitats.
Yeah, and like even I remember my childhood, because Charleville Castle is, and the grounds are very close to where I grew up, and would have been, you know, the safe place to go walking as a child with the dog, and you would have had that carpet of bluebells, and unfortunately around the country that carpet is a thing of the past because of these invasive species.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, like there's winter heliotrope, which is a very it's very successful but also very popular sort of ground cover plant, and people would introduce it into gardens. You often see it in big, you know, walled gardens, and in again, but that just takes over, and I mean it outcompetes all those nice spring plants like the, you know, the snowdrops or the bluebells or the one that's out at the minute is the lesser celandine, which is that yellow plant that yellow flower comes out very early along the verges and stuff this time of year. So, you know, it's complex, but that's what we mean when we look to natives. And the reason we sort of say plant natives where you can and if you can is because our fauna, then our animals, our wildlife, our foxes, our badgers, our bees, our blackbirds, they evolved over millennia, millions of years, to know these plants, to eat these plants, to nest in these types of trees, and to know, you know, and to know the bugs that live there and familiar, and they are their habitats, and they are their food, and they are their places of rest. So, sort of what's good for the goose is good with for the gander. So, that's what we would always promote.
So then, like say, like the bees, you know, there's always media coverage around bees and the problem of bees dying out and not having enough of them, and just the sheer danger that we face if we were to lose our bee population entirely. So if we are out and about and we see, and I know we're a bit early in the year for this yet, but we see lavender plants and bees hovering away, eating away, but lavender isn't native to the island, is that doing damage?
No, absolutely not. So this is kind of where, if you're being too much of a purist, you can actually, you know, damage what you're trying to sort of help in a way. So if I was to say I'll only have natives in my garden, you're actually limiting yourself quite a bit, and you're limiting what the nature, the bees, you know, can have as well. So nature or wildlife only has two main, it needs food and it needs shelter, and if you can provide one or both of those things in your garden, you'll have more birds, you'll have more bees, you'll have more insects, you'll have, you know, more butterflies, whatever. So if you can provide that, so this time of year when the early queen bees emerge, the first thing they're looking for is a feed. And if you've cut all the dandelions out of the lawn before you get to have the pollen out of them, that's a bad thing. However, if you have a lovely big you know, hanging basket or planter or flower bed full of lavender, they're going to head straight for that. Okay. So you can provide nectar and food and shelter for plants using introduced and cultivar varieties like from a garden centre, no problem. In fact, Ireland would be quite impoverished for those early sort of plants that would provide, you know, those nectar. So it's no harm that we have options beyond what would be available to us if we just chose native stuff.
So if we're looking at maybe sprucing up the garden, we can, and we're feeling limited, as you say, by being strictly native, we can still be biodiversity friendly and plant Irish grown plants that technically are not native.
Yeah, well, then you're doing the sustainable piece as well, because you're getting plants from the garden centre down the road who've either grown them themselves or got them, you know, somewhere close by, rather than bringing them from Holland or, you know, Egypt or wherever they might come from. So that's a good piece, of course. And then, I mean, the thing is, what you're trying to do as well, you're trying to extend the season as long. So you're trying to bring as much food early in the season as you can. So there are varieties that are of early flowering. So if you go into your local garden centre and ask your horticulturist, say, look, I need something that's going to flower really early in the season because I want to help the bees. I want it to be biodiversity friendly, and they'll find you something, because that's really big business now. They are, and you'll see now. I've seen it more and more over the last few years. You go into the garden centre and they've big signs up saying this is the pollinator friendly zone. These are the nature friendly plants. That sort of stuff. So they are. They're expecting people to come in and ask these questions now. So that's one way of doing things. And then you're trying to extend the season out as well, because come October, November, when everything flowers and goes to seed, you don't have that much flowers anymore as well. So if you can find a variety of plant that flowers right into the colder months, that's really, really helpful for insects as well, and birds and those sort of things. So they're the questions I'd be asking if you're trying to help your pollinators in your garden.
And it is worth saying, Ricky, like, to go into the garden centre and ask those questions. And look, I'm going to be really blunt. Sometimes you're better off going to the local family-run, perhaps, garden centre, as opposed to the big box shopping centre type one that might only have very lovely but well-meaning young people working there without the experience or knowledge. And a local garden centre that does have a horticulturalist on staff will be a font of information.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And look, and again, like, if you go into your garden centre, they are shops. The customer is always right. If you go in and say, I want hedging that's going to grow fast, it's going to give me great privacy, and it's going to be easy to keep, they're going to sell you laurel, because it will do exactly those things. Now, if you go in and say, I want something Irish and native, and I'm willing to accept that it's going to take a little bit of time to establish, but it's more important for me that it's going to be good for the birds and all that, then they're going to sell you a thorn hedge, black thorn and white thorn.
So it is important to just ask, to not be afraid to ask those questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, so they will sell you what you want. So if, like, you go in and you ask for something that's going to grow very fast, going to give you great privacy cover, it's going to be zero maintenance, they will sell you laurel.
Yeah.
If you go in and say, I want something native, I'm willing to let it, develop over time, but I want something that the birds are going to nest in. There's going to be loads of flowers, loads of food in the autumn. They're going to sell you a thorn hedge, black thorn and white thorn, which is the hawthorn is white thorn. It's sold as white thorn sometimes, and black thorn is sloes basically. And it's the best hedge, the thickest hedge you'll ever get. And I can guarantee your neighbour's cattle aren't going to come through it. The local burglar is not going to come through it. It's going to give you great security. Some people are afraid of thorn hedges, but I mean, they are traditionally what we have in this country, and they're beautiful, and they provide all those things. I mean, a white thorn, like a hawthorn, that it goes into flower in sort of April, is the most beautiful thing. It's the smell of it is just incredible. It's where you will get all the bees buzzing around. There will be a hum around it. The birds will be there, and then the haws come in the autumn. Of course, those red berries, we can't eat them. Well, we can, but it takes a bit of preparation. But the animals, the birds, absolutely love them, and they'll strip them and it'll keep them going. So, I mean, even if you have a small garden, to introduce something like a hawthorn tree to your garden would be a massive sort of thing.
Yeah, my neighbours have beautiful ones, so it's on my to-do list for 2026, Ricky.
Give it a go.
Now, like, this can sound complicated, but again, we know we're trying to simplify the conversation, and like, go to the garden centre, ask to speak with the horticulturalist who's on staff, and then the language that we choose to use, like to say that we're looking for something Irish and native. Like, and then if we're trying to, if we are a bit green fingered, or we just enjoy getting out and about, or maybe even we're trying to teach kids about the importance of biodiversity, should we be planting bluebells and snowdrops and things like this that we know are maybe under threat in other parts of our community? Yeah,
so this is complex, because there are cultivated varieties, so there are non-native varieties of both of those things. And the same as we love daffodils in this country. Daffodils do not provide any food for bees. They've no nectar, basically. So they look beautiful. They look great. They're absolutely doing no harm. So they're doing no harm. So that's important to say. But they're not benefiting wildlife in any way. They are benefiting us, because when you see a big bed of daffodils, it makes you smile, definitely.
Oh, particularly after all the rain and greyness in recent weeks. I love seeing them on my morning commute.
Totally. But this is the intersection of why we're moving away from encouraging people to plant wildflower seeds, because in those packs and in those things, you actually don't know what you're introducing. It'll say it's Irish species, but there's no way of guaranteeing that. And then what you have is you've all sorts of stuff cast around, and the sort of the wider countryside that you don't know what you're getting, and it's really, really grey. It's a grey area. It really just, it's not a good idea. So, but in your garden, that's fine because it's a garden and it will provide flowers and it's no big deal. And everyone knows it's not wilderness or it's not meant to be wild, but it will provide food for pollinators again. Now, so about this stuff, but we have like this, there is a Spanish bluebell, which is invasive. And it can get into our woodlands where there's natives, and it does outcompete them because it's hardier.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so to be encouraging people to plant non-native sort of bluebells is for me a little bit sort of it's I'd be nervous doing it. However, if I walked into your garden and you had a big pile of them under your trees, I'd probably be, I think they were beautiful. But again, they're not brilliant for pollinators either. They are a woodland plant. They like shade. So if you have a shady garden, I mean, it is one of your options.
Okay.
So yeah, so it's one of those things. It's like I go back to the dandelions. Dandelions are prevalent in nearly all lawns, but culturally we hate them along with nettles and briars and stuff like that, and we tend to spray them or cut them out. But they're actually probably the most important flowering plant to our native pollinators because they're one of the first ones to flower.
Mm-hmm.
They're abundant. They have abundant nectar, and if we don't mow them out of the lawn in the first sort of 5 hours of them being there, they're really good. So if we can just turn a blind eye to the dandelions for a few weeks in April when it's a really hungry month, that would be a really good intervention to make just in your garden, or even leave an edge. You don't mow them all, or even a little island where that's wild that you're willing to let go for a few weeks or whatever. If you can stomach that, that's even worth doing.
Or even if you really do want to have that pristine front lawn that the neighbours can see, and perhaps the local community watch group or whatever might want to be kept nice and clean and tidy. Maybe if you have a patch in the back garden that doesn't get looked at as much, there are compromises that we can make along the way.
That's a good idea, yeah. And even if you are someone that's just extremely neat and wants your Peter O'Mahony that just is mowing your lawn like every other day, you can mitigate for that by having some nice flower beds, well cultivated and well, manicured ones, or window boxes or whatever. Once there's flowering plants that provide nectar, it's good, so
Absolutely.
that's okay too.
And it's, as long as we're all doing our bit. And the wonderful thing about the dandelions is that we all get to be very lazy. It's our job is to do nothing and let them do their work. So it doesn't necessarily have to be hard labour.
No, it doesn't. And I tell you, actually, I'll give you an example. So we have a very wild garden here. We almost let it completely go. Now we mow some of the grass for the kids to play and stuff, but otherwise it's kept. But actually, I would say if you scored our garden, if a biodiversity expert came in and scored our garden against our neighbours, who was very neat, they probably would nearly balance, because we don't have a lot of cultivated flowers. Whereas my neighbour, when all the wild stuff in our garden goes over, his flower beds are only coming into bloom, and then all the bees go next door. So in balance, you can have both versions can be actually quite good for pollinators. Now, you'd never catch a fox or a mouse or whatever dead in Dermot's garden because there's nowhere to hide. But there are lots of nice flowers at times, so it's a really good pollinator garden. Whereas maybe the bats forage more over here because there's more insects in at night and stuff and blah blah blah. But there is balance.
Okay. Well, Ricky Whelan, thank you for breaking all the lingo down for us in relation to this, because I know it is something that does cause, well, a bit of confusion at the very least, but sometimes a bit of stress as well when people are trying to do the right thing. Ricky Whelan is, of course, the Biodiversity Officer for Offaly County Council. Ricky, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Aisling.
We'll be back after the break.
Let's Go Green, sponsored by EirGrid, managing and operating Ireland's electricity grid for a cleaner energy future. Check out airgrid.ie for more.
You're listening to Let's Go Green here on Midlands 103. Well, for the last 16 years, Junk Couture, the festival of creativity and circularity, has been encouraging secondary school students, not only from across the country, but now around the globe, to put their creativity to the test and create couture-esque outfits made from entirely recycled materials. This is a fabulous event every single year. I participated in it when I was in transition year when it was called Form and Fusion. So I know just how much hard work goes in. And last Tuesday, groups from across Ireland, the UK, America, France, Italy and the United Arab Emirates descended upon Dublin to showcase their designs at the World Final. Truck tarpaulin and disposable surgical tweezers were amongst the more outside-the-box items featured in the ensembles, with cardboard bin bags and aluminium can tabs being ever favourites. With representatives from Laois and Westmeath taking to the stage, we sent our reporter Zoe Ryan along to check it all out.
Last week I attended the Junkator World Final up in Dublin, where 3 of the contestants were from the Midlands. But before I spoke with them, I sat down with the CEO and founder of the festival, Troy Armour, to find out how and why it all started.
As a teenager, I was a kid that didn't fit in. So I was terrible at sports. I was much more artistic and creative. And so in 2 sides of school, so the side where all the cool came, sports and everything, I failed. And in the side of schools where it was all academic, again, the kids that were in art were like, well, they're the ones that don't do good at anything else. I finally realised that I was born to stand out, and so many people are. But when you're a teenager, standing out is actually the wrong thing, right? It's the wrong thing. So that's where Junkature kind of started out. It started a little thing with this idea of, could the Young Science Exhibition be replicated for kids that were creative? Kids that are not good at sport, kids that don't have a platform for that voice of expression that they have. And then growing up in rural Donegal in the 70s and 80s, the word sustainability didn't exist because it didn't need to, because we were naturally circular. The word circular there, circular home. Like, I remember we would have had clothes from our cousins, and then it went down through my brothers, and then it went on to another house after that, and we were taught we could sew and knit at a very young age. We mended things, so the minute you got a hole in your shoe, you knew how to fix that. It was never a case of I needed a new pair of shoes. It was just I needed to fix was a thing. There was always tools around home. That was kind of the mentality. So all those mix of things, came together to make this, and then the reason that it still exists is because my heart beats with it, and my heart beats with it because I know what it does for young people.
I then headed up to the VIP area to catch up with some of the special guests.
I'm Claire Garvey, and I'm one of the judges for the World Final of Junkature, so I'm so excited and honoured.
Wearable art, that is your most recent project. You can't get any more wearable art than Junkator.
Well, this is it. I've just done my own exhibition in Powerscourt House and Gardens, so I'm so worried now that this stuff is even way better than mine, but it's so inspiring to see it. And God, the amount of stuff from all the different countries, it's incredible.
What are you hoping to see tonight? What are you looking to wow you?
I'm hoping for stories and for information about different countries and different pieces of fabric that I've never seen before. I mean, there's some things that are made out of seaweed and macadamia nuts, and it's just mind-blowing to see all this stuff. And also the stories and watching the kids all connect together as well, which is so important, because I was very shy growing up, and seeing kids like me starting out their journey now and hoping that they've so much of a big journey ahead of them of success. So
something that strikes me about them when you speak to the students who are involved in Junkator is the way they're light years ahead. When I was their age, I wasn't thinking the way they are about sustainability, about the environment. It's really encouraging to know that the younger generations are thinking that way.
It's absolutely brilliant, and to have them from all the different countries all uniting and talking, going, oh, how did you do this and how did you do that? And there's so many awards. There's performance awards, and there's awards for plastic, use of plastic. So there's lots of different awards, but everybody here gets to walk on the catwalk, and already the cliche is that they are a winner, but they genuinely are. It's a big family of people, Junkature, and to spread that word all through America, all through Dubai, London, Paris, bring it throughout the world and further afield if we can.
How important do you think it is that we host events like this in Ireland?
It's huge, because Ireland started this event. I mean, I think, and look how far it's come. Like, it was like one show, and now we're bringing people over from Dubai with huge big outfits and things made out of coconut husk, and it's fascinating. But it's also even more important to bring the cultures from different, and watching people, Muslim hijabs are done in a different way. And it's so inspiring that everybody, no matter what your religion, what your size, whether you're shy, whether you're confident, can all get together and celebrate just being human and being sustainable and being friends. And these are friends that they'll make for life as well. I wish I had something like this when I was growing up.
My name is Beverly Scallon. I am the Chief Commercial Officer for Vision Ireland. We're here today. We're offering a pop-up experience for all the students. We work closely with Junk Couture throughout the year. They support us at our festivals. We have same values in terms of looking after the environment. I think if we look at the talent that is here with the young students today, we've got students from the age of 12 to 19. These are the future. This is the talent of the future.
We're Haywood Community School, and our team is Céline Queen, and we have Anya Carter, Kayla O'Mara and Elaine Miller, and I'm their teacher, Sharon Webster.
Girls, tell me about Céline Queen. Firstly, where did the idea come from?
Well, we got the idea from fashion designer Lena Barisha, and she designs wedding dresses. We kind of wanted to go with like an ocean theme, so we went with a mermaid style dress, and then that's where the salt bags came in as well, because that's got to do with the ocean.
Tell me a little bit more then about the materials that you used in it.
We used salt bags from our local factory, and we used meal bags from the local piggery, and we were all living on farms, so a lot of our agricultural background as well.
We started designing the dress in September 24, and since then it's just been non-stop really, like fixing up the dress and going through competitions and getting down. We didn't even expect to get into the first round, so we were very surprised.
Great opportunity to try something new outside of maybe like sport or anything else like that. It's just so different, yeah.
And how are you feeling ahead of the final tonight? It's yourself who's going to be taken to the stage, I can tell by the glitter and the outfits going on. So how do you feel about going out there on a stage with competitors from all across the world?
It's pretty exciting. You would be nervous, but the excitement is the best part, and the crowd is just so good as well. Everyone's cheering each other on. They're so supportive. It's not judgmental at all. So it's just, it's a great space.
And from a teacher's perspective, obviously we know the likes of sports and other kind of academic realms have been championed for years and encouraged for extracurricular activities. But for the arts, it's maybe something that historically hasn't always been nourished in schools. But the likes of Junk Couture, like that the teachers are even involved now, we see that it's really encouraging people to flourish with that side if you are creatively inclined to go with it. So do you think that it's important that the schools do keep carrying on doing the likes of Junk Couture as well as doing with their academic stuff and obviously their sporting things, that they get behind the art students just as much as we see schools getting behind the likes of your sports clubs when they get to finals?
Yeah, 100%, yeah. And our whole school is behind us. We've got a busload on the way to us at the moment. Wow. Messages all day from our teachers, our principal, our vice principals are coming down as well. And there's a huge support for the girls. And that, we don't get that opportunity to, in a competitive field, to have that kind of light shone on us. Usually if it's an art competition or something that we'd enter, it's smaller, it's more private, it's quiet, where this is nationwide, it's worldwide now, and the girls have got such attention, such focus on them. There've been articles about them, they're getting interviews, and the whole school is backing them up as well, and absolutely it's so important. And they get to, so many of their teachers and their students get to see what they're doing behind closed doors, in the art room as well. So yeah, it's hugely important.
My name's Emilia Milashuta, and I go to St. Joseph's Secondary School in Rochford Bridge.
And tell me all about the design that has you here at the final tonight.
My design name is Lalaloon Veil, and it's inspired by the older generation, and it's supposed to give a nostalgic feel, and it's completely made out of milk cartons that I got from my friends, my family and people from my school, and I cut them up in a way which left very, very little waste.
And with sustainability, is that something that you've thought of before getting involved in the competition? Is that why you got involved, because you've an interest in that? Or is it coming out of it now you're after getting kind of a better understanding and awareness of it?
Sustainability has always been a part of my life. I feel like people just need to pay more attention to it, but it became a much more bigger part of my life after Junk Couture, which I did in first in TY, where I made a dress out of tens of thousands of paper butterflies made out of origami. And then I only got to the regional finals after that, so I decided to take part again in sixth year. And I think Junk Couture is just so amazing because it makes people so much more aware of what's going on and how we really have to try harder to be more sustainable.
So this isn't something that you've just taken on recently. As you said, you've been involved in Junkator previously, got to the regionals, you've decided to come back, arguably bigger and better than ever, and you've now gotten into the final this year. But in sixth year, that's a big undertaking in sixth year.
It was crazy, especially balancing, the leaving cert and all. It was crazy. So it took me over a year to make the dress, just planning it out because I knew how busy I was going to be. But I just really wanted to do Junkator again, and I'm so glad that I did.
So obviously there's a lot of teams to be involved in this, creative teams of multiple students working on it with a teacher backing them. But you've decided to go solo on this. You're the only person in this team.
Yeah, I went solo because I didn't want to rely on anyone else, and I wasn't too sure that I'd be able to finish this project. And I had times where I wanted to give up, but with friends and family pushing me on, I got through it, and I'm so happy because now Junkator will always be just part of my story, and I'm so, so grateful.
Moat Community School, and we're Blueprint.
Why was it that you decided to get involved with Junkator? Is it a case that throughout school you've always been very into art, design, that type of thing, or where did it come out of? Why did you decide to get involved with the competition?
Well, I know I've always been into art, so I was really happy to get into that. And then I've always had an interest in the sustainability aspect, so I found it really interesting.
Well, I've always gone to the Junkator competitions in the past, and my sister was in it. And me and Erin especially always used to go up when we were younger, so it's always just been like,
it's very nice to just watch it.
Yeah, and to look up to doing it
and then be a part of it.
Yeah.
So tell me about the design. Where did the idea for the design come from?
Well, we call our dress Blueprint because we were inspired by the blueprint for change in the future. And we took our theme for the dress was the 4 elements. So the shape of the dress of the skirt is like waves, and the way the dress moves is kind of like the wind. And then the gradient on the top represents fire. And then we use plastic tubing on the headpiece and the shoes, and they represent the roots of the earth.
Where did you source all of this material from?
Miss Kyo got the medical jackets for us.
Yeah, just from a company that I suppose told me that they had some waste products and if we wanted to use them, so we took the jackets from them, yeah.
And you mentioned that you're interested in sustainability. Yes. So tell me why this piece, I suppose, captures that interest of yours.
Well, we wanted to represent the change that kind of has to happen from all the man-made catastrophic events, because it's kind of just a disaster at the moment.
And what would your hope be for this dress? Like, would it be that people would see it and that it would, I suppose, encourage them to change their ways? And in what way do you think people can change their ways?
Just by, even if they just reduce their use of plastics, or if they try reuse stuff in different ways, because the dress kind of shows that you can use anything just to create your own.
And luckily we did have a winner from the Midlands on the night.
The Purposeful Plastic Award recognises the design that pushes the boundaries of how plastic waste can be transformed through creativity, innovation and material exploration. Our Purposeful Plastic Award winner is Lala Nouvelle!
Emilia, you've just won the Purposeful Plastic Award. How are you feeling?
Feeling so, so good. I was first out as well. I was completely unexpected. Me and the girls were crying backstage. It was absolutely amazing.
Talk to me about the material that you used in your design. When we spoke earlier and you said it was made out of milk cartons, I just assumed it was the cardboard ones. And then when I saw the designs, I said, how did she get it so delicate? I thought maybe you had put the cardboard ones under heat to remove the plastic filming, but you actually used the plastic carton. So tell me about that design process, where you got the idea for using that material and how you went about using the material.
So I chose the plastic milk cartons, the white ones, and I cut them up in a way in which they were clover pieces and that they like blended together and kind of became like a wavy shape. And it was very purposeful because plastic, it's not really flexible, especially not this type, so I had to kind of calculate where everything was being placed. It was crazy, but I wanted to make it look flowy even though it wasn't supposed to be flowy, you know.
Honestly, it looked so delicate. And so it was a total ensemble. You had the dress, then you had the big headpiece. Now, when I say big headpiece, you were kind of rocking a little bit of a sia here. It was coating your face so much so that other contestants said to me they'd never actually seen your face because of the big bonnet.
Yeah, actually, people backstage don't recognise me until I show them a picture. But it was all very intentional. I wanted that mystery, that, you know, etherealness. I wanted to not be recognised, because in the end I just wanted my piece to really just show.
Something you've definitely executed, but what is next for you now? I know you're not studying a design route in college, but has this changed things for you? Is it something you're going to say, maybe there's something here, maybe I should pursue design in some way?
I mean, fashion, art has always been my hobby, and it will continue to be my hobby for probably the rest of my life.
Do you feel proud to be representing your county tonight as an award winner, not just a finalist, but an award winner?
I'm so proud, especially that my friends are here to support me, and my family and people from my school that kept pushing me on. I'm so happy.
That's it for the World Finals for this year, but the 2026 Regional Finals are set to get underway next month, and yet again, a number of Midlands hopefuls are gunning for gold.
Well done to our representatives from Laois and Westmeath at the World Finals of Junk Couture. Our thanks to reporter Zoe Ryan for checking it all out for us. We'll be back after the break.
Let's Go Green, sponsored by EirGrid, managing and operating Ireland's electricity grid for a cleaner energy future. Check out airgrid.ie for more.
You're listening to Let's Go Green here on Midlands 103, and we are towards the end of our show this week. My thanks to our guests, Pat Kane of Reusey.ie and Ricky Whelan, our Biodiversity Officer for Offaly County Council, and of course Zoe Ryan, our reporter who went to the World Junk Couture Finals and gave us an insight into all the hard work that youngsters put into putting those costumes together. As I said myself, I still remember participating in it when I was in transition year in secondary school in Our Lady's Bower, Athlone, and it was brilliant crack. Okay, it was called Form and Fusion then because it's more than 16 years ago now, but it was brilliant crack. It was a fantastic learning experience, and it's something that if you're in transition year this year, or you've a member of the family that is in transition year and they're maybe not getting as much out of it as you had hoped, it's definitely worth getting involved in that year in particular, and just have the crack and enjoy it. It's such an amazing experience, and it has grown to this global phenomena that is really worth celebrating. If you missed a part of this week's show, or indeed any episode of Let's Go Green here on Midlands 103, you can listen back to each and every episode on midlands103.com or on your preferred podcast app, whether that's Breaker, Apple, Spotify, whichever one you prefer. If you search for Let's Go Green with Aisling O'Rourke, you will find it there. And if you really do enjoy the show and you are a loyal listener, well, thank you very much. Please do, on your preferred podcast app, give us a 5-star rating and write a review, because it all helps to spread the podcast to the apps of more listeners and more people who might be interested in the topics that we cover each and every week. Of course, this programme is aimed to encourage us all to talk more about environmental issues so that we can learn more and really bridge the gap between fear and action when it comes to tackling climate change. So if you're involved in something, or if there's a community group in your area that you'd really love us to give a mention to and a shout out and a virtual pat on the back to on the programme, please do feel free to get in contact with us and talk to us about the work that you're doing. You can phone Midlands 103 directly. You can go to midlands103.com and click on the on-air team button, and you will find my face and my name there, Aisling O'Rourke. Or if it's handier, you can email me directly, hello@thecommunicationscoach.ie. So that's hello@thecommunicationscoach.ie. I sometimes, admittedly, can be a little bit slow at replying to emails because life gets a little bit busy, but I do promise that I read each and every one of them each week, and I appreciate you all getting in contact with us. That's all I have time for on this week's episode of Let's Go Green. I hope you have a great week, that you enjoyed this week's show, and I'll be back same time next week with more conversations and I hope, around environmental issues here on Let's Go Green on Midlands 103.
Let's Go Green, sponsored by EirGrid, managing and operating Ireland's electricity grid for a cleaner energy future. Check out airgrid.ie for more.